found a romantasy that I like, and I'm so glad because that does not always happen. This is Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry. It's pretty new. It just came out at the beginning of May this year, 2025, and I will admit that I bought it on impulse because it was so beautiful. Part of its marketing is that it's for fans of Fourth Wing and A Court of Thorns and Roses. I think those are just being used as marketing comparisons. I enjoyed this one better than either of those books, and I will go over why. So despite some things in here that I was not so fond of, there were some that were done surprisingly well. So, to be someone who doesn't normally read in the romantasy subgenre of fantasy, to find one that I really liked and respect the author's writing was really nice. Perry is an already established romance author. This is her first foray into romantasy, so adding the fantasy elements to the romance. I thought she did a good job. But before I go into my opinions about the book, I should probably talk about what it's about. The main character, Odessa, lives in Calandra, which has a beautifully done map in the front, broken up into kingdoms. She lives in the southernmost one in a coastal kingdom, and this world is inhabited by monsters. So you have the normal beastly things like tigers and bears and stuff, but the gods have introduced even fiercer, stronger, worse monsters that kind of help control the human population. And the big bad of these monsters is the Crux. And every few decades, the Crux migrate. So the Crux don't live on the continent of Calandra, but when they migrate, they fly over and are extremely destructive to the point of destroying civilization to where they have to rebuild. And this story takes place just a few months before the next predicted migration. And being a land inhabited by monsters, the kingdoms would, as usual with countries that are close together, like to fight each other. They'd like to invade each other. That's just kind of how the world is, even fantasy worlds. But the more that the kingdoms fight each other, the weaker they are against monsters and against Crux migrations. So they have come up with this treaty called the Shield of Sparrows, which is basically a marriage treaty. So between the 5 kingdoms, if there is a prince and a princess of marriageable age, they will just arrange a marriage. And the first princess to be the first shield was named Sparrow, hence the name Shield of Sparrows. So the Shield of Sparrows is the marriage treaty that keeps the kingdoms tied together, fighting monsters and Crux instead of each other. And Odessa, although she is the older princess, has not been chosen to be the Shield of Sparrows. Instead, her younger stepsister has been chosen and has been in training for a long time to go be the queen of Tura. And not just queen, but spy and possible assassin if necessary. But then the Crown Prince of Tura and his mysterious companion, the Guardian, come to Quentis, where Odessa and her sister May live. They were hired to kill some monsters, and when they get there, they say that the payment they want is Odessa as the Shield of Sparrows instead of May, which throws everything into confusion and is the starting point of Odessa's story. Through this book, we follow Odessa on her journey to Tura and as she gets to know her new husband and new companions. And it is well known Tura is a dangerous place. Everyone starts learning how to fight from childhood. That's kind of the case all over the whole continent. And while Odessa has some training, she didn't do very well. She didn't impress her teachers very much. And so she didn't make it very far, and she's not very impressive when it comes to fighting. So that's one of the things she works on through this story, is learning how to fight. So she doesn't just have to be a maiden in distress, but could eventually protect herself if necessary. I got the feeling that Tura is a lot like Alaska is in the United States. Up in the northern wilderness, it's a larger land, but fewer inhabitants, it's more wild, very foresty. So that's the basic what's it about. Now, things that I thought were good and bad. I'm gonna start with the things I was less fond of. And probably the thing that bugged me the most was the modern, young adult feeling language that the story is told in. It's told in first person, and even though the main character, Odessa, is 23, it reads like she is younger, more kind of older teen when we're in her head. And then the language just feels very modern, which I don't like as much in a fantasy story. It probably bugged me more towards the beginning, and then once I got used to it, it was more fine. There were a lot of very short sentences, kind of leading to the YA feel. The main character had a lot of like ruminating, lots of just sitting back and thinking about things, lots of mental rhetorical questions that she asks herself. But sometimes she would also answer herself like, a good princess would do this, but am I a good princess? Absolutely not. So there was a lot of just that format of she's thinking about something, then she mentally asks herself something, and then she mentally answers herself, and then she acts on whatever she answered herself with. Another one of those things that felt kind of weird, but once I got used to it, it was just the storytelling style that was being used. Also, modern curse words. If there's going to be curse words in a fantasy, I kind of like Brandon Sanderson's style of world-specific ones. So you have your gods or your style of magic or whatever, and then base your curse words off of that. So when a character in the world uses an expletive, it feels like they're in their world instead of our world. And then a couple of tropes. So most of my least favorite tropes are actually in the romance genre. This one is very much enemies to lovers. I feel like it can be difficult to do a well-done enemies to lovers that feels good and feels romantic because I don't like when they're mean to each other. I want them to be able to play nice. I don't want anything to feel like it's tipping into abusive territory, whether verbal or emotional or physical or whatever. So I think enemies to lovers has to be very carefully done. And in this one, they insult each other a lot. They don't like each other. It's not friendly teasing, at least not at first. So it's not as bad as it could be. It's just not a trope I'm generally fond of. And then the miscommunication trope. So this one goes into not just miscommunication because they didn't feel like talking about it, but the main character, Odessa, is very purposefully kept in the dark from a lot of things, partly because they expected her sister, that wasn't chosen as the Shield of Sparrows, to be a spy, because they had spies spying on them. The truce is very thin. So even though they chose Odessa instead of her stepsister May, they still expect that she's probably there to spy, so they don't just tell her everything. So she is kept in the dark. So the world and the plot has mysteries that are mysteries for everyone. There's weird stuff going on in the world and with the magic, and they don't know what it is. But Odessa, the character who we are seeing from her point of view, knows even less. And that was kind of frustrating. Like, there's this mystery going on, and we don't even get to know what the other characters know, because Odessa doesn't get to know it, and we only get to know what she knows. And a lot of the chapters followed a very similar format, which was Odessa gets up and goes and does something, exploring where she is, going to go talk to somebody or go find something or whatever, go do some training. And then the love interest just shows up. They rib each other, they insult each other, they interact somehow. And then a lot of chapters end with her rhetorical question to herself. Got a little predictable, but it was fine. But then, things that I did like, because I did enjoy this and I will plan on reading the next book. I actually thought the pacing was very well done. There were some points where in each chapter it felt like Odessa's mental ruminations went on a little bit long, and then the pacing of the book overall didn't have that like midpoint or 3/4 point slump where I'm like, okay, are we still moving toward the end here? I never felt that. I did think it was a standalone at first. So as I was nearing the end and there were just some things that seemed like they were wrapping up and not others, I was like, we're running out of pages to get to the resolution here. And then eventually I realized this isn't going to end in this book and there's going to be another one. But at no point did I feel like it was dragging or rushing. At any point where I started to feel like, okay, I'm ready for the scene to change or for something different to happen, that's generally about when it happened. So like, okay, they've been in this place for long enough, what's going to happen next. And then Odessa and other characters would go somewhere else. And I was like, just in time for me to not get bored. And then we have the romance author writing a fantasy romance. I thought the fantasy world was believable and well done, not overly complicated. In this first book, there's not a lot of deep world building. I don't think it was necessary. The main plot is the romance plot, and then the other, like, larger world plot didn't need a really complicated magic system or anything. None of the main characters have magic. Actually, that's not true. The Crown Prince's companion, the Guardian, has some kind of mysterious power. They don't know if it's magic or not. That's kind of mysterious. He's a little bit monstrous. He's physically stronger and faster and is able to fight the monsters in the world better than normal humans, but he's not a magic user. There's a very specific race of humanoids. They're not really described as being humans in the normal sense, but they're not really described as being a separate race. I don't think anyone in story really knows what they are, and there's only a couple of them. We only see 2 of the Vosters. The Vosters are the religious order and the only ones who use magic, and it's very like air and water based, and they have blood magic. Blood magic is how they seal oaths and pacts and treaties. They can silence people with blood magic, and the Shield of Sparrows marriage is sealed with the Voster blood magic. But there is no main characters learning magic. There's no rules of magic really explained. It's just kind of a simple, here's the magic, here's how it's used for the plot, that's good enough. And I felt like it was good enough. And then the characters, because they are not really knowledgeable with the world's magic, they don't necessarily know whether certain things are magical or alchemical. Did the alchemists do this, or did the people who know how to use magic do this? We don't know. We don't really understand it. Kind of like if you don't understand how electricity and computers work, is that a natural science or is it magic? I don't know. So I thought the world building was very well done. The magic was not super intricate, but good enough to serve the plot and to be believable. And I didn't see a lot of holes to poke into the magic system because it was not super intricate. I also really liked that Odessa, the main character, was just like a normal person, kind of giving the sense of the girl who's not like other girls, but not on purpose. Not being like other girls is never stated. It's just kind of the normal thing with a main character that she doesn't always feel like she fits in. She's kind of more of the artsy-fartsy kind of person and not very sporty, not very good at fighting. She's kind of clumsy, but not a big deal is made out of it. It's just kind of part of her personality. There is nothing special about her. She has no hidden power or secret talent, but she does persevere. When things get hard, she works at it, she pushes through with what she's learning. She's just kind of a normal, admirable character, which was nice. And she's trying really, really, really hard to be a good wife, even though she doesn't feel like the Crown Prince is reciprocating that feeling of trying to be a good marriage partner. So as far as the romance, I appreciate that the romance was built on a relationship based on relying on each other rather than just sexual tension. Which there was some sexual tension, but it wasn't the main part of their relationship. It was like an added extra. They see each other at first as enemies. It's an enemies to lovers trope. Then they slowly start to get to know each other more as people, even though they're both keeping their secrets and not really opening up to each other, but the desire is building. This was described on Amazon as a slow burn. Some of the reviews were like, oh my gosh, what a slow, slow, slow burn. And I will have to agree, very slow burn. And if you are in the audience of romantasy because you like a spicy story, there is one scene. And there's like a little bit sprinkled in other places. They like joke, there's innuendos. But as far as like camera in the bedroom watching, there's only one. I also like when the love interest is that like loyal, fierce protector. I felt like that aspect kind of made up for the enemies to lovers, which I don't always like. Even though they were enemies, he was still in a position to protect her, even if it felt like he didn't want to at first. I also felt like Devney Perry was good at writing some poignant moments that had nothing to do with romance, had nothing to do with the main plot, just like the main character has a couple of moments where she grieves for something that she is never going to have in her life. I felt like that was a really realistic thing for the main character to be feeling, part of her character growth and her personal internal journey. I really appreciated that. A relationship that the main character is building with one of the child characters. Things that main character Odessa and the child feel like they have in common. They're kind of drawn together, thrown together. I enjoyed that relationship. The story has mystery, it has betrayal, and it has a plot other than the romance. And the plot other than the romance was well done, in my opinion. Every little plot thread, any little thing that was introduced by Perry mattered. There was no thing introduced that ended up as a loose thread. All the stuff that the main character goes through has some kind of payoff. I'd like to compare that, actually, I don't know if this is fair or not, but to Robin Hobb, another author that I have been enjoying a lot lately. I admire Hobb's writing, but there have been a couple of times where I felt like something was introduced that should have come in again later, or should have mattered more, or should have come up again, and didn't always. And so there were times where I kept expecting something from before to come up, and I was like, okay, well, why did you introduce that? Just world building, just to be more immersive, whatever. When Devney Perry introduces something, it comes up again later. In fact, that was part of what I felt like was good about the pacing, was little plot threads that I was like, you know, it's been a while since this thing was mentioned. I wonder if it's still gonna matter. And then about the time I was thinking that, the thing that I thought maybe had been forgotten came in again. I thought that the twists were believable and introduced at the right time. I thought there was enough solved for a ending to feel like the ending, while still saving enough that wasn't solved at the end of this one to make at least me want to read the next one. So because this just came out in May, I do not know how long we're going to have to wait for the next book, but I will be buying it. And I hope there's a special edition that comes out just as pretty as this one. I will link websites or social media links for the artists involved in this because it is so well done. I'm gonna flip open to the end paper really quick because I think this piece of art is so lovely. And then even without this beautifully done dust jacket, I always read them without the dust jacket because I don't want to ruin it. Still pretty. Even the spine. So I'll be keeping my eyes out for when this releases, so hopefully I can get a hold of a special edition of it. And as far as thinking that this one is better than Fourth Wing or A Court of Thorns and Roses, after reading Fourth Wing, I wasn't sure if I was going to read Iron Flame, which I did, and then felt like I did not need to read Onyx Storm or the rest of the series. After reading A Court of Thorns and Roses, I did not feel any compulsion to continue on in that series, even though I have heard it gets better after the first one. After reading this one, I want to read the next. I want to read the rest of this series, if it's a series. Which I think speaks well of Perry's ability to write a good romance, but also a good fantasy. So I'll put a link to this book in the description. I'll also link my Instagram and my Patreon. Thank you, patrons. I appreciate you guys a lot. And happy reading. Bye.